A very good evening and warm welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, brought to you by Pick and Pay. In another tumultuous week for the wine world, we are still, if you're watching this somewhere else in the world, we are still not able to buy, sell, transport, lend to our neighbors a bottle of wine, let alone any other alcohol. And today, the wine industry had enough. I think that's probably the best way of putting it. A large collective led by the ebullient Groot Skalkberger, his good mate Jean Engelbrecht. They're two members of a tight five for you. I think Charles Back involved, the Stellenbosch wine routes as a whole, Mike Radcliffe throwing his weight behind it, Wellington wine routes, Hemelanada wine routes. About 140 people in total, I think, have come together and have challenged the ruling. They've gone to the High Court to say, you know, this is really not going to help South Africa. The industry is buckling, and I think that's not being melodramatic. It is buckling at the moment under the crushing weight of trying to survive what is an enormously testing time. And so we're hoping something comes of that. We're hoping that some sort of dialogue emerges. Said this all of last week as well, and that the wine industry can get back on its feet and try and claw back some of the ground it has lost over the course of the last few months. Really, really trying times, and a huge amount of sympathy for the wine industry, the farmers, the wine workers, the trade, the restaurants who've got the added blow of that curfew, which makes the evening sessions non-viable and the lunchtime sessions alcohol-free. So they are really struggling as well. But we're hoping there's a little light at the end of the tunnel. That light is not an oncoming train. And in the spirit of trying to keep people smiling, we've decided today to dedicate the show from two slightly different angles to not just one of my favorite estates, but one of South Africa's most revered red wine estates, and that estate is Kanonkop. A little later in the show, we'll be crossing over to Higgo Jacobs, the renowned sommelier, and Roland Peens, the wine salesman, amongst many other things. They are the guys behind the Strauss Fine Wine Auction that's coming up over the weekend. And in that auction, as well as Bokenhoutskloof and Klein Constantia with some super Van de Constance, there is a healthy consignment of Kanonkop. We'll be finding out exactly what wine is there, how the auction works, and how you can get bidding. But before we do that, the current winemaker at Kanonkop is Abrie Beeslaar. If you've read Emile Joubert's fantastic history of Kanonkop, you'll have a sense of the man who has picked up the baton at Kanonkop and has now been making some fabulous, fabulous wine at the estate that is probably most famous over the last few years for getting that mythical 100 points for the 2015 Paul Sauer. We've got some Paul Sauer to taste, the 13, not the 15, but very, very close to it. We've also got some of the pinotage, for which they are also a very celebrated estate. So let's say a very good evening, Abrie Beeslaar. Thank you for joining us from down in Stellenbosch. There's a smile on your face, and most of the time I speak to the winemakers. They do try and keep a strong front and a cheerful visage, but these are difficult times. How tough has this been for Kanonkop?
Thank you, Dan. Thank you for having me. It's been difficult times. At least we still have some wine, in stock in our cellars to drink. So it could have been worse. But it's been really tough. I think when you look at the people working for you, that's probably been the toughest. Just to keep them all positive and focused, and I think just trying to keep everybody positive through these times. I think the first lockdown, was quite a bit of a shock. Luckily, as soon as the exports opened up, we could get back to business. And then as the market opened up locally, I must say the market really supported well. I think everybody really dug in and supported their brands. So we had a pretty good June, but now it's back to square one almost. Even the export markets, there's some markets doing okay, but a lot of our wines are sold through restaurants. A lot of international restaurants are still running on 30% capacity. So it's to predict how it's going to turn out is quite difficult, but we're keeping positive. I think as South Africans, that's our mentality. We're prepared to work through it. But I think we're getting to the point that we are, we stop this silent diplomacy of just waiting and seeing. We must be proactive as well. If the taxi industry can get 100% occupancy, then we should be able to sell wine as well. And how to get that message through to the government. Hopefully, the team that's taking it all to court will get the message through. And the message is not that we just want to sell wine. The message is that we want to keep our people, the people that work for us, keeping food on the table, keeping them employed, and not carry on, with job losses and farms closing down. And we have 300,000 people directly involved in the wine industry. So it's a lot of people that's part of this whole issue.
And in a country where employment is a constant issue at the best of times, we really do need to salvage what jobs we can. A number of restaurants I've already seen that have closed down has been enormously saddening. But let's try and put a little bit of cheer on today, a couple of smiles, and do so with wine that I think, Abrie, would suggest that Kanonkop will come through all of this okay, because you've got such a strong brand, and it's a brand that people think has been around forever, because Kanonkop is just so established, making great wine, flourishing around the world, getting these extraordinary accolades, and yet Kanonkop's not nearly as old as people might think.
Yeah, it's the first wine under the Kanonkop label was made in 1973. Although winemaking has been part of this property since the early 40s. So Kanonkop was part of the bigger property that was called Eight Cake, and then in around 1929, Paul Sauer, when his family decided to sell Eight Cake, he wanted a piece of land that he can carry on with wine growing and farming. So that was around 1930. Kanonkop was started out of the Eight Cake property. So that was about 140 hectares, and that's where Kanonkop started. And then Paul Sauer really was the person that took it off from there. At that stage, there was not a lot of vineyards on the property. And he planted, even in the 40s, already started to plant some pinotage here. When a lot of South African industry was focusing on white wine varieties, Paul Sauer was planting reds. It was a big German influence back in the 50s and 60s in the South African industry. So majority of varieties were white varieties, also more focused on for distilling purposes, a lot of these vineyards. And he focused on growing red varieties, and he planted Cabernet, he planted pinotage. So in 1973, Jan Boland could see it, started with a Cabernet Sauvignon, and that's where it started. And then over the years, we were selling less and less to the big companies and making more wines ourselves. And then in the early 80s, we were doing everything ourselves. So that's how it started, and it's still one of the few family-owned businesses in South Africa, fourth generation now. The fifth generation is just getting into it. So we are focused on quality wines and quality first. Every decision we make is how will that affect quality. And even when we decided to grow our second wine, the Cadet, we said we wanted to grow quality faster than volume, which is something different. We try to be not less corporate and more of a family and quality-driven property.
I'm getting a sense of how the interview process with the Kriggers might have gone when you went for the job. Abrie, do you like red wine? Yes. Do you like white wine? No. Right, you've got the job. Because you make a rosé, but there is no white wine. You could certainly make white wine on the terroir you have, but it's clearly a part of the winemaking world that just laps up the opportunity to produce red wine. What is it about Kanonkop that allows you to consistently make some of the best red wine in South Africa?
It's, just coming back to my job interviews, actually at the same counter I'm sitting now, and Bayer Streeter actually appointed me. He asked me if I want to join him with Kanonkop, and after a week, I said, yeah, well, that doesn't sound too bad. And when they appointed me, I didn't even know what I was going to get paid. They didn't even tell me, or payers didn't tell me. So I was here about a month before I first saw my salary. And I met Johan and Paul around this counter, and Bayer said, "This is the new winemaker." And they said, "Oh, all right." And that was the interview. So that was very informal. Yeah, so it's like I said, this is how we operate here. We very very little structure, but everything comes together in a certain way.
And it comes together in particular in that red wine, and we've got some of it to kick off. But the pinotage, the first wine we'll try, the 2015, and just kind of reflecting on that question again, the nature of Kanonkop, why it is so conducive to red wine, and the kind of red wine that can get 100 points from respective critics internationally.
Yeah, so we grew everything over the years. We had Sauvignon Blanc, Chenin Blanc, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Riesling, Zinfandel, Cinsault, you name it. We've had everything on this property over the years, and then only you realize what works consistently better, and that's why we've ended up with Pinotage and Cabernet being the main varietals. And then again, the vineyard where the Paul Sauer comes from. This is a vineyard that the viticulturist actually said, you shouldn't. The soil is too poor to grow quality wine. You must plant grazing and keep sheep on the land. That's you'll make more money out of that. And luckily, the guys back then said, we're not sheep farmers. Let's plant vineyards. And that piece of land, has such a unique identity that just shows the quality of the site. And a lot of time people don't realize that quality soil doesn't mean quality wine. So something, we have to look sometimes at the poorer soils to be able to make the better quality wines. But I think, again, the Simonsburg area around here, we're just far enough from the ocean that we have warmer days and we have quite cool nights. So that's always a very good quality for a region to have that's growing red wines, that you have warm days and cool nights. And I think we have, a couple of degrees warmer than the guys closer to the ocean, or even the other side of Stellenbosch.
The first of our two wines, both of which underscore very vividly what you've just said about being able to create quality red wine, is the Pinotage. How difficult is it, as we try this, to be making Pinotage, knowing that you're following in the footsteps of Beyers, who, when you cut him, he bleeds Pinotage. That really is the heartbeat of him as a man.
Yeah, I think no. Luckily, we're still friends. We still taste together. We meet each other on a regular basis. I think the love for the variety, started already when I was at Swartland Winery. I made quite a bit of Pinotage there, and I love working with a challenging varietal. When it comes to Cabernet, a lot of the work is the plant does the work. You're a bit more of a spectator, but when it comes to Pinotage, you really need to be involved. And I've always said, if you like to go to bed 12 o'clock at night, then you shouldn't make Pinotage, because you're going to mess it up. It's a variety with distinct qualities from the grapes, from the vineyards, and you have to understand that to work with this grape. Otherwise, you're not going to get it right. So there's a lot of factors like fast ripening, very fast fermentation, high pHs, high malic acid content. A lot of issues that are different with this variety, and you need to understand that to make a quality Pinotage.
The grape Pinotage does. It gets a bit of debate. There are those people who really enjoy it. There are those people who are not so enjoying of it. Where do you stand on Pinotage as South Africa's defining grape? The rise of Chenin, seeing other varietals do more and more and do so successfully. Is this for you still South Africa's number one?
Yeah, I think so. I really enjoy quality Chenin. I think that's the other varietal that can really set us apart in the world. But we just see it ourselves. The sales of our wines for international market, people are hungry for quality Pinotage. And I think perhaps sometimes we are our own biggest enemy when it comes to this variety. And the quality of Pinotage today, just it's worlds apart from where we started. And because we're understanding the variety much better, the doomsayers especially within the industry, are normally the people that don't understand varietal well and doesn't work with grapes grown on the right sites. People always talk about noble varieties. There's nothing more noble for me than something that's specific to a site, like proper Pinot Noir. It needs to be something that's connected to a site, to soil, and pinotage really reflects that. I work with pinotage, close by, and it's 8 different vineyards, and all of them have their own identity. So it's for people that don't enjoy pinotage, I always say your palate probably hasn't developed to the point that you can enjoy it. So please just keep on drinking. You'll get there someday.
Persevere. So that is the first one I've had there, the Kanonkop pinotage, and I've just taken a degree or two off it, and it's it is lovely, especially on a winter's night, and it's a great warm-up act for the big one. And this is possibly South Africa's most famous wine at the moment, Abrie, because the Paul Sauer, not this particular vintage, but the Paul Sauer as a whole, on the back of that 2015 and the 100-point score, just rocketed to the attention of everybody right around the world. When you first had that 2015, did you think, even by the high standards of both yourself as winemaker and the Paul Sauer as a name in wine, that vintage was something special?
Yeah, I think, the first time you realize, the quality of the wine is when you look at the vintage, and the vintage was just close to perfect, and that means for us, no real heat spikes or heat waves. And that really helped. To create quality grapes that we could work with. And then, the Paul Sauer wines, when they're young, they're quite shy and they don't show much. The second indication that I do get is when, the wines age in barrels and you just see they suck up the wood. There's, even in a new barrel, you don't see any new oak present. And that's always, for me, a good indication of the quality of the vintage. And with this 2015, the wine was so delicate, but you couldn't see any wood. And for me, that was a real show of quality and an expectation of what's to come.
We don't have the 2015 here. I know that Roland and Higgo are going to try very hard to persuade me to bid on some at their auction a little later on. But I do have the 2013, which is also an exceptional wine. For people who don't know the Paul Sauer, you touched on the history of Paul and his relationship with him. This wine pays tribute to Paul. What is the makeup of the wine, and what is it for you as a wine, really, that makes it so special for you to make as the winemaker?
Yeah, the Paul Sauer was first made in 1981 by Beeslaar. I think it was only the third Bordeaux blend coming out of South Africa, so it was still a relatively new style of wine in the market. It is it's a blend of normally about 70% Cabernet, 15% Merlot, and 15% Cabernet Franc, and it goes to new oak barrels for 24 months. And I think it's the lowest lying part of the farm. I really feel that it's the quality of the soil, but also the accumulation of cool weather at the bottom of this slope. Normal in the mornings when I take a walk up the hill, you feel you walk out of this cold cloud, and as soon as you hit the slopes, it's much warmer. So the accumulation of this cold temperature here at the bottom of this slopes of this little valley really, I think, plays an important role also in the ripening of this fruit. So yeah, the Cabernet, the Merlot, the Cab Francs, all planted next to each other. We ferment them separate, and then we do the blending before we go to barrel, which is also different. And at that, when I started, I asked Bayer, so what's the best Paul Sauers you made? Was the ones you blended before or after aging? And he said, the ones he blended before, but what it actually meant is that those vintages, the wine showed themselves better. So, and I tried my best from there to carry on with just blending before we go to barrel. It's a bit more difficult, takes a bit more time, but it's definitely worth the effort. The marriage of the varietals during this aging period is quite unique.
You struck the perfect chord with that process with your 2015, and it's an incredible honor to get the 100 points. It was much talked about. How much pressure, though, does it put on you as a winemaker for your subsequent vintages?
I don't care much about that stuff. It's I don't know how I got the 100 points in the first place, so difficult to duplicate it. But yeah, I've never felt much pressure. The pressure is if I don't do my job properly. The conditions, the stuff out of my control, it doesn't bother me at all. If there's a hailstorm or it's not nice, but I don't start crying about it. So the things that I can control, I try to do as best as possible. And the only times I'm unhappy is when I haven't done my best. And the rest is up to the to the Lord and the conditions and to the nature. So those things that I can't control, it doesn't bother me at all.
A very pragmatic approach, and one that clearly works. Just before we let you go, Abrie, we've got a couple of guys you know fairly well joining us in just a moment. Higgo and Roland are doing some light stretches before they come online with us. There's some extraordinary lots up for auction with Strauss kicking off this Sunday. What's your pick of the lots? What should I be selling the family silver for and putting my money down on?
Yeah, it's we just chatted a bit earlier about it, and it's my pick will be the 06 Black Label Pinotage. It was the first Black Label Pinotage we made. There was only 1,000 bottles made of that wine, so there can't be much left. Then also, I would buy vintages. I like the 91 vintage specifically. It's always been something close to my heart. Always said the 91 Pinotage was the best wine I've tasted from Kanonkop, together with 95 Paul Sauer. But then also we just chatted about, I'm not sure the Italian name, but the 5 liters of Paul Sauer's, like a vertical from 88 to 2006. So it's a massive vertical. So anybody planning big Jerobium, thank you, Roland. I think for somebody that's inviting a lot of people over, that would be in fact a magnificent display of wine. I don't know of any collection of that size in South Africa except for the one that's here on the property. So
I have seen it. I have my eye on it, and my bank manager is furiously hoping that I lose Wi-Fi connection when the bidding starts. Abrie, thank you so much for the time this evening. Thank you for giving us such lovely, lovely wine. Keep doing so. And here's hoping that the industry we all love and cherish is back on its feet and heading towards better times soon.
Thank you very much. Nice to be on your show.
Abrie Beeslaar, winemaker at Kanonkop, the architect of that 2015 Paul Sauer that dazzled the world, and the architect of so much red wine and a rosé that continues to be lapped up by fans all over the place, and will be lapped up by fans of specialist wine, of rare wine, of vintages. You heard Abrie talk about that daft selection of Jeroboams, as well as some other vintages. Those all form part of the Strauss Fine Wine Auction. And before I go into that, just a quick disclaimer, and that is this is a very, very dangerous auction. David Higgs tells me he switches off his phone and his computer when these auctions stop because he can't hold himself from buying brilliant bottles of wine. But gee, there's a great selection, as there is again now. A quick thank you to Angelique Kouvelakis, who's just feeding in saying, I do enjoy Kanonkop quality wine, and thank you, Angelique. Thank you for always watching. And Scott Stapelberg, who's saying he's sitting with a Kanonkop Cape Blend to sip on for this one. South Africa's biggest advocate of Cape Blends. Right, let's go to 2 other great wine advocates. Together, they are the backbone of the Strauss Fine Wine Auction. It starts on Sunday, so let's say a very good evening to Higgo Jacobs and to Roland Peens. Gentlemen, a very, very good evening. Welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, brought to you by Pick n Pay very proudly. And in a really interesting week, because on one hand, you guys must be delighted. You've got a great auction coming up. You've got some extraordinary lots. But Higgo, the South African wine industry at the moment, it's a pretty depressing time.
Yeah, I think if you think short term, it's a depressing time. I those who know me would know I'm a bit of a silly optimist, so don't listen to me too much. But I think we're having a frustrating blip, Dan. But we'll be okay. We'll recover.
Well, we've got good enough wine and good enough people to do so, and you two definitely form part of that particular community. Roland, this wine auction, first of all, I hold you responsible for my children not being able to go to university based on my purchases of the last one, where everything I thought I'd be outbid on, I wasn't. But I ended up with a cellar full of Evan Sadi and Miles Mossop and Jocelyn Hogan-Wilson and Luddite, and just terrific wine from South Africa. And I'm clearly not the only one who's excited, because this space that you've created in partnership with Strauss has absolutely taken off.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. It's been interesting because during lockdown, we've actually seen the most success and the most successful bidding on all of the auctions that we've held. I think we've held 6 so far since the start of the joint venture between wine seller Higgo Jacobs and Strauss & Co. And we're seeing that the best bids and the best bidding now during lockdown. I think people have got more time, and they've got the ability to sit down and evaluate and spend.
Higgo, what does it say to you about no problem. What does it say to you about the South African wine market, and I suppose the secondary market? Is this just people who really enjoy wine, such as myself, or are people starting to view South African wine as a genuine investment vehicle?
Well,
yeah, I think that's
Dan, it's a
right.
long story. Oh, Higgo can tell you the story though.
Sorry, Roland. I think, Dan, that's kind of what I meant a little bit earlier there as well when I said I remain optimistic. I mean, we're in a broader scale, or in a macro scale, or in a long-term scale. South Africa is enjoying quite a bit of positive attention on the fine wine scene. So we don't want to be we don't want to be arrogant with results. I mean, it's still a young venture. We only started last year, and I think part of the success this year is just more people starting to trust and more buyers coming to the fray, etc. So I think it's a little bit premature to start reading stats and reading too much into it. But without a doubt, the reason that we formed this venture is because we are upbeat about the collectability of South African fine wine. About them appreciating financially, but also just, I mean, worst case scenario, in a while, if they didn't appreciate, then you're drinking a fine wine. We're doing our utmost to select South Africa's finest wines, and we're doing our utmost, if they're a little bit older, to make sure that they come with good credibility and good provenance, so they're in a good condition when we put them on sale. I don't want to seem unsensitive when I'm talking. When I'm saying that it's just a blip. I realize that it's tough times for a lot of businesses out there. It certainly is, and we're all feeling it. But in the broad sense, South Africa is really enjoying quite a wave of recognized quality worldwide, and it's been so for maybe the last 3 or 4 years. Our wines are really being recognized for what they are, and what they are is absolutely brilliant across the board.
You won't get any disagreement on this particular show. Roland, the auction, it kicks off on Sunday. You're focusing on 3 main spaces, the Boekenhoutskloof, the Klein Constantia and Van der Constans, and then the Kanonkop. We will have a quick look at the other 2 towards the end of the show, but right now, the Kanonkop, it is such a pillar of the South African wine industry. It's such an established name. The Paul Sauer 100 points from 2015 has only enhanced that. It must make this particular auction that much easier to market and to get out to people, knowing that you've got Kanonkop as your headline act.
Well, if one looks at Bordeaux, for instance, one thinks about the great wines of Mouton, Lafite, Latour, Margaux, Haut-Brion, Petrus. You think of the first growths. They're the ones that spearhead the region of Bordeaux, and we need that in South Africa. We need the shining lights, the first growth, to do very well. In South Africa, we've got a very small difference between the beverages, the everyday drinks that we purchase, and the very fine wines, which are a lot more expensive. In South Africa, that difference is about a multiple of 200. So let's call it 20 Rand to 4,000 Rand. In France, that multiple is 10,000. The most expensive wine is 10,000 times more expensive than the cheapest. So we have a very immature industry, and we're not trying to push up prices whatsoever, but we feel there's a long way to go for the market to realize the top-end wines.
Well, talk me through that by extension. Then the Paul Sauer 2015, we were talking off air just before we got going, that 2015, what it's now changing hands for, and how much more that is than you would have anticipated if I'd asked you that a year ago.
Completely. It's a good case in point. When it was released 2 years ago, it was 600 Rand a bottle. And today we've seen it on auction over 5,000 Rand a bottle, which is quite a crazy appreciation. But because we trade on the secondary market already on our brokerage platform, we've been offering it at around 3,500 Rand a bottle quite successfully. That's what we think the market price is. So that's really what the auction is doing. It's allowing more data into the market, and therefore we're able to assess the market prices much better. And that's what our industry needs, because if you go to France, one is easily able to see what that vintages cost. Whereas in South Africa, there isn't a platform, there isn't the market data, there isn't the liquidity of back vintages, and that's really what dictates the market value of fine wines.
The prices that we've seen at the auction have been incredible. I think of Ken Forrester's FMC, which he reminds me of on a daily basis. Thank you, Kenneth. Never let old people get onto WhatsApp. But across the board, it's been a really exciting endorsement, I think, of our wine industry. And I suspect we're going to see something similar at this upcoming auction. Higgo, give us some of the Kanonkop lots that you think really stand out. Perhaps kicking off with what might be the most extravagant collection of Jeroboams ever put up on auction in South Africa.
It's a ridiculous lot. I went to look at it because it's at Kanonkop. It's never left the cellar. The collector, shame. I mean, he's moving back to Italy, so he's putting his wines up for sale. But he's been buying one of the Jeroboams. And just to put it in context, Jeroboam in champagne size is different to Jeroboam in claret or in Bordeaux size. It's a 5-liter bottle. So there's 19 vintages, 88 to 2006, 19 vintages so across 3 decades of arguably South Africa's best red wine. There's 1 or 2 other wines that come to mind that would argue with that space if we just think about provenance and credibility. But yeah, 3 decades of Paul Sauer in 5-liter, meticulously stored. It's one of those things that sort of take your breath away when you see it the first time. I walked through the now considerably sized Kanonkop cellar. I mean, if Johan and Abrie host you for a snoekbraai at Kanonkop, and you don't have a guide to take you back to your car, you can get lost now in the Kanonkop cellars. And it was in one of these sort of like trips through the cellar, and they showed me that collection of the private collector, and it is just really mind-blowing. They're in a great condition, and yes, you do need quite a few people to drink those wines with you. But I was saying to Abrie earlier in our Strauss chat, it should really be bought by a museum, you know, almost, because it's a snapshot of South African history and of our best wine.
What about you, Roland? The Jeroboams are a huge one. What else from the Kanonkop selection should we be looking out for if we're joining the auction?
Well, it'll be interesting to see the 2015s once again, what prices they go for. But really one needs to decide, do you like very mature wines or do you like more younger style wines? And as a retailer, we get asked that question a lot. I think the key is just to taste more, because the older wines certainly give off a different character. They're better for different occasions. And sometimes I'm in the mood to drink a very old wines, but sometimes I like younger wines. And I think it's all customer preference. But look out for the mid-90s Cabernets. I think they're one of the hidden gems of Kanonkop. Very classically styled, they age beautifully, and in fact, they actually take 10 to 12 years to show their best. And that's maybe one thing to mention about Kanonkop and fine wine. And the reason why Strauss & Co. Got into fine wine auctions is that wine is released very young. And if you don't have a cellar to cellar the wines when they're released, how do you get access to the vintage ones? And here's an opportunity where you can buy 10, 15, 20-year-old Kanonkops in perfect condition, and they're ready for the dinner table tonight.
Yeah, I love the fact that you're getting these wines straight out of the Kanonkop cellar, so you know that the wine has been looked after. It's going to be in as good condition as it possibly can. And it's a huge range of Kanonkops. So go and have a look on the Strauss website for that catalogue, for that selection. It's not only Kanonkop, though, a couple of other estates. Higgo, Klein Constantia. If the Paul Sauer is our modern icon, then the Van de Constance is arguably South Africa's overall icon wine from times of Napoleon and Austin onwards, and you've got a really interesting selection, including a couple of quite old bottles on that list.
Yeah, we've got a very nice spread, Dan, ranging all the way from 1987 up to 2011 is the youngest vintage that we're putting on. It's remarkable. These wines are really remarkable in their modern form, as it's been sort of reignited by Klein Constantia. The first vintage of that was 1986, but that was non-commercial. Even though we have sold 86 before, we don't have an 86 vintage on this one. But 1987 was the first commercial release of this wine, and it's just one of those wines that some would argue that it's getting better, some would argue that it's getting worse. It's really just displaying vintage variation in sight, but they are unbreakable. We've done a recorking exercise on the 87s and the 88s just a couple of weeks ago to make sure that the bottles that we're putting on auction are in good nick, that we're putting our stamp of approval on to make sure that you're not getting a dud bottle if you're buying one. And Matthew, before we started opening them, said to me that these wines are unbreakable. And I mean, that's something that'll stick by me. It's ridiculous. Even the bottles with notable leakage and really bad ullage was still looking in a decent shape. So they are incredible. A highlight for me is the 1987. It's one of my favorite vintages. It's just you don't need to drink it as a dessert wine anymore. When they get that old, they tend to drop their fruit sweetness and they develop this nutty, tertiary, savory character, almost like a dry Oloroso or something, like a real rich sherry, or like an old Madeira or so. And in that sense, you can drink it as an aperitif. You don't have to have it as a dessert wine. It's really appetizing because it also retains the acidity. And then another vintage is 1994. It's also just a standout vintage in terms of its balance of acidity and sweetness. Not very sweet as well. I tend to prefer the vintages that's not too cloyingly sweet. So 94 is one of those as well. And the 94 still has a lot of time. It still has some legs for keeping further in the cellar. And then some of the younger vintages, 2008 is a standout. That's quite an opulent, perfumed, quite exotic in its flavor profile. But it's just a beautiful little spread. We've kept it to a small amount from Klein Constantia. We don't want to put too many bottles into the market, and that's something that Klein Constantia is also managing quite well. So it's only a handful of the older vintages, and then up to 6 bottles max of the younger vintages.
A reminder there, by extension, what Higgo's saying, that keeping your dessert wine and aging it a little is no bad thing. It will change the nature of it with time, but that's all part of the joy of exploring wine. And there is some terrific, terrific dessert wine to explore through that Van de Constance on auction. So that is one other element of it. The final one is Buchenhartskloof. I'll be tasting some of the Buchenhartskloof Syrah on Wednesday night with our South African Wine Tribe guests across the UK with Greg Sherwood and Wines of South Africa. And it's another, I'm not sure if they qualify as a first growth, Roland, but Buchenhartskloof, another one of our, I suppose, winemaking royalty brands. And the Buchenhartskloof range at the top of the fairly big selection that they do continues to churn out not just some of Franschhoek's best wine, but some of South Africa's.
Yeah, Dan, it's an iconic property, and it really started with a vision that Mark Kent had in the late 90s, and sticking to his guns, producing a style of wine that wasn't really apparent in South Africa at the time. Around then, we were using a lot of new oak. We were picking early, adding a lot of acid, working the wines quite hard. And Mark, he had some experience in the Rhone Valley, and he produced a bit more of a Northern Rhone style, and that's really paid off over time. Not only have the wines aged beautifully, but they've got a wonderful balance to them. And just taking a step back, if you look at Boekenhout's today, not only do they make great reds in Cabernet, Syrah, and the Journeyman, but they make great whites too. The Semillon is an incredible aging wine, and we've got the 2004, which will blow your hair back, Dan. It's just one of the greatest South African white wines ever produced. Incredible wine. I'll put your name down for that one, Dan. And
thank you, Roland.
And then and sweet wines too. They make wonderful noble late harvest. So here's a property that can do sweet wines, white wines, and red wines right at the top level. And I'll ask you, Dan, is there another South African property that can do that?
I don't think there's another property that does quite as much across quite so many levels. If you think these are the guys who don't just give you that great Boekenhout's, but they can also do the Wolf Trap, and also do the Chocolate Block, and also do the Porcupine Ridge, and now the added dimension that the West Coast vineyards are bringing into their wine as well. They're a very diverse property, and I think Mark is a visionary in that sense. So I'm both very excited that you have Boekenhout's on there, and also very worried about my ability to pay my bond next month as a result of you including all of these on the list. But I'm really excited about having a look at it. I've been part of the auctions a few times now, and they're enormously good fun. For people who haven't been involved, I think, well, this all sounds really cool. How on earth does it work? How do I get involved? What's the process? Roland, how does this play out? How do people register? How do they watch? How do they buy wine?
Yeah, it's pretty simple. I think you go to your Google machine, you type in Strauss.co.za, you go to the wine section, and really go and browse the auction. You don't have to bid now. You can put some pre-bids in now and wait for Sunday to see if they hold. But I think Sunday, when there'll be a live virtual auction, we'll see some competitive bidding, and that's really where the wines will be sold. But yes, you have to register for that. There is a process on the website, not very difficult, Dan. I think you could even do it. It's worthwhile doing, and even if you don't win any bids, it's just fun. It gets you worked up. Maybe have a few glasses of wine on Sunday morning and start bidding. It's a lot of fun too.
This, of course, from the man who's hoping that will sway your judgment and convince you to spend lots of money on South African wine. Before we wrap up, I'm going to ask you guys both the same question. Roland, I'll kick off with you. You can buy one bid across the board: the Kanonkop, the Van der Constance, the Boekenhout's. What is the one lot you're going home with, no matter what it costs?
Well, look, the 19 Jeroboams is probably going to fetch R250,000. So that's a nice one to have as an investment, but I won't choose that one. The 87 Klein Constantia Van der Constance, I think, is going to be a great investment. And even though it's probably going to be somewhere around 25,000 Rand, in 10 or 20 years' time, it might be 10 times or 20 times that. And I think that'll be a great investment.
All right, big call, but it's terrific wine. Of course, it'll be a great investment if you can stop yourself from drinking it, which I would not be able to, and so it throws the investment part out the window for me. But if you've got a little bit more self-control, it could be a very shrewd buy. Higgo, you've got the credit card. Your bank manager's given you carte blanche. What lot are you walking away with?
Dan, I won't need much carte blanche. I'll buy a bargain. The 2004 Semillon from Boekenhout's it's a staggering wine, I have to admit. I mean, it was one of my wine moments this year, and I've had some good wines this year. We tasted the whole lineup except for the 97 Syrah, just because there literally isn't any. That's why we only have a single bottle lot of the 97 because Syrah on. But the 2004 Semillon, they backed out the whole lineup. So listeners would, if they log on to the website and they look at the tasting notes, we've got updated tasting notes on all of the Boekenhout's wines because we tasted them literally a month ago. And the first wine I tasted when I walked into the room was the 04 Semillon, and I was like, I might as well go home. Like it's just it is a mind-blowing wine. You cannot believe how young and fresh and zippy and tight it is. And I think the estimate on that is 4,000 Rand for the 6-pack. So I can buy that and some other lots.
Or maybe not, because now you've just given it such a glowing endorsement. I think everybody has got the vote of faith. Guys, it's really exciting. We need some excitement in the wine world at the moment to lift the clouds that have been hovering for a little while now. I love the fact there's such diversity to what is on offer, both in terms of vintage and varietal, especially that Semillon. I think Older Semillon is one of South Africa's better kept wine secrets. It's a terrific range, so jump on, have a look on Strauss and see what that catalogue has to offer. And you've got two curators here who put together an enormously special collection. It'll bankrupt you, but very happily so once that bidding gets going. So to confirm finally, Roland, pre-bid start on Sunday, the time and the date for the actual live auction?
No, so pre-bids you can put in now already. If you go onto the website, put in a cheeky bid, why not? But on Sunday, 11 a.m., that's when it's going to start, and it'll take about an hour and a half, 2 hours, and quite a fun format watching this live auctioneer. It's probably going to be Alistair, and he's incredible auctioneer. And yeah, just watch it. It's going to be lots of fun.
All right. Entertainment, great wine. It's a super way to spend your Sunday. Guys, thank you both very much. I know you put an enormous amount of work into this. I also know that when you started this, there were a few people raising polite question marks over how this could possibly be a good idea. I think you've proved fairly comprehensively that it was a particularly good idea, and it's added a wonderful dimension to our local wine industry. So thank you both very much, not just for joining me this evening, but for being part of this great auction story. Best of luck. And I'm sincerely hoping that it's a very low-paid auction, which means I'll have a bit of luck when it comes to taking home some wine. But Roland, Higgo, thank you both very, very much.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Dan.
There we go. Roland Peens and Higgo Jacobs joining us. They're the guys behind the Strauss Fine Wine Auction with Kanonkop, Klein Constantius, Vin de Constance, and the Buchenholzkloof cellar, including some of that great 04 Semillon. Could that be the pick of everything on sale come Sunday? Big thank you to them. Big thank you to Abrie Beeslaar from Kanonkop as we tasted some of the 2015 Pinotage and the 2013 Paul Sauer, as iconic a South African red blend as we have at the moment, and red wine that will serve me well for the rest of this evening, because yet again it's a particularly chilly night in Johannesburg, especially when you're sitting in a wine cellar. So I'm off to light a fire, have another glass of that Paul Sauer, and enjoy my Monday evening, and hope for some good news for our wine and restaurant industries over the coming days. More wine tasting through the course of the week, including Thursday with our live tasting, where, amongst our other guests, we will have Corlaire Fleury from Bosman and have a look at some of the wines she makes as one of Wellington's and indeed South Africa's top winemakers. Big thank you to all of you for joining us. If you are not part of the Pick and Pay Wine Club, then please join up. Absolutely free of charge. I know you can't buy wine at the moment, but you can order stuff online. You can have a look at what's available, and as soon as the suspension is over, then that wine can come hurtling towards you and you can celebrate some more great South African produce. So join that wine club, 3 times the smart shopper points, and absolutely free to do so. Thanks again to our guests this evening. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay home if you can. Celebrate South African wine. If you've got friends overseas, tell them to buy more and to support our producers. I'll see you again 5 o'clock on Thursday for more live tasting on Dan Really Likes Wine, presented by Pick and Pay. Cheers.